It's time!
What's kicking, everybody? We are back for another episode of Pickin Fights. I'm Keith, joined as always by Tom. Tom, how are you today, brother?
I'm doing great. I am on the road again, traveling, going back to South Carolina, but I couldn't miss two cards, or I couldn't miss a UFC 274 numbered card. I couldn't miss 2 out of 3 cards. I'm not taking a vacation. Well, I am, but I'm not taking a vacation from Pickin Fights. Last week, not the best week from us, both of us hitting at around 50%, which I'm happy that, if we have a bad week, our bad weeks are 50%. It's not like our bad weeks are terribly losing, knock on wood, but we had to, kind of come back and prove ourselves again to the people. So I'm excited to pick these fights with you. UFC 274, an amazing card, at least the main card. The undercard can leave a little bit to be desired from a fighter name standpoint. But at the end of the day, I think there's going to be some really slept on fights. And honestly, if you go back and you look at the past 2 cards, UFC Vegas 53 and UFC Vegas 52, I believe they are, a lot of people weren't high on the cards. They kind of slept on them. But, hey, we've had some 2 back-to-back really good cards, especially finishing off with Marlon Vera beating the absolute shit out of Rob Font. And I just want to apologize to the people. I should have known Rob Font is from New England, and those guys rarely ever get finished. So calling for him to get finished, I think, was a little bit out of touch. But I think there was 2 or 3 times in that fight where they probably could have finished it. And when you look at the damage accumulated on Rob Font's face as compared to Marlon Vera, I mean, it was a large discrepancy in terms of the power shots and the significant strikes landed there. What do you think?
Oh, I loved it. Incredible fight. And yeah, it was crazy to see how bad Rob Font's face looked at the end of that. It looked like he was in a car wreck. But guys, everybody watching this right now, just like Marlon Vera beat the shit out of Rob Font, if you're watching this on YouTube, please beat the shit out of the like button and subscribe. Comment down below. Let us know what you think. And if you're watching this on Twitter as well, please throw us a like on there, retweet. Leave some questions in the comments as well right now, and we will answer those questions as we're going along. But yeah, that Chito Vera fight, incredible. One of the highlights for me personally, I'm a big Action Bronson fan. Love playing as him in UFC 4, the video game. And, Chito Vera walked out to one of Action Bronson's new songs off his new album. So I was pretty excited to hear that. But incredible main event. Chito Vera looking as good as ever. I think if they do make that rematch between him and Sean O'Malley at some point, he just obliterates Sean O'Malley. No doubt about it whatsoever. He is really just rising up through the ranks in that bantamweight division. So proud of Chito. Hoping for the best for Chito Vera. So let's dive into UFC 274. It's going to be absolute fireworks. I'm so excited for this card. I can't even put it into words. I was working last night, and I felt bad for the guy I was working with because I immediately started off the night by saying there's a huge UFC event this weekend, and I'm going to be talking about it all week. So just get used to it right now. So we're going to kick it off like we always do with our prelim locks. One of my favorite segments right here. It's a staple of our show, and I only have one for you right now. And I am taking Norma Dumont to win by decision over Macy Chiasson because Norma Dumont is a really good all-around fighter on a nice little streak right now. And, Macy Chiasson, she's pretty good. She's pretty mid for the division. Not bad by any means. But, you look at the little streak that Norma Dumont's on at the moment. Wins over Aspen Ladd in her most recent fight. Felicia Spencer. She does have a loss to Megan Anderson a little bit earlier in the career. But regardless, Norma Dumont's really good on the ground. She knows how to wrestle somebody like Macy Chiasson, who's a little bit more of a striker. Keep her down there, control her for the majority of the fight. And something that we've spoken about many, many times on this show, women's fights are judged heavily on control time on the ground rather than damage on the ground. So as long as you're just smothering somebody down there, you're chilling. Norma Dumont also has a pretty decent enough stand-up game to keep up with Macy. So I'm taking Norma Dumont to win by decision for all those reasons. And also, Tom, you had some great logic a few weeks ago, and it's really rung true, that you can almost bet on every women's fight to go the distance. So I'm doubling down on this one. It's going to go the distance, and obviously somebody has to win, and it's going to be Norma Dumont here. Are you rolling with me on this one, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going with Norma Dumont over Macy Chiasson. I think she's going to win, but I'm not necessarily going to call Norma Dumont win a lock. But what I am going to do is I'm going to call that fight to go to decision a lock. And then I'm also going to follow that up with the Tracy Cortez fight and calling that one to also go to the distance. So combine those two. I'm sure they're probably minus 250 or something. So you combine those together and you probably have a minus 100 or maybe even closer to plus money for both of those. I feel really, really good about both of those two opportunities. You combine them, you can parlay them. You may have to wait a little bit closer depending on your book to take those fights to go the distance or not. I was looking on FanDuel this morning. They have, I think, the main and the co-main, they allow to go the distance and allow you to bet on it, but you have to wait a little bit later to get those more prop style bets for those two fights. But yeah, I like those two fights to go the distance. And kind of, my two things is, I always talk about siblings in the UFC, and then I talk about women's fights going the distance more often than not. I think Tracy Cortez is going up against a fighter here who's going to be her first time in the UFC, Melissa Gatto. She has, some power. She has knocked people out in the past, but I think Tracy Cortez is going to be a little bit more experienced and a little bit more wise to what she's trying to do to her and avoid that. Tracy Cortez has been pretty durable throughout her career. And, what I was getting at, though, aside from women's fights being able to go the distance more often than not, we also have that kind of the rub effect of whether it is your significant other or if it is your brother or your sister who's also in the UFC with you. When they win, you tend to lose, and vice versa. We look at the Dawkins brothers as a prime example. Unfortunately, last week, Davison Figueiredo's brother kind of proved me wrong a little bit, but he was due for a win, and it really was down to his career on the line there. If he lost, he probably wouldn't have been in the UFC, and I'm sure he's still even a little bit more on the hot seat. But I'm thinking Tracy Cortez, being that Brian Ortega took that loss to Alexander Volkanovski, I'm going to look at Tracy Cortez to redeem that couple and get a win there. Just kind of following the balance and the inverses of the world and the semis and the powers that be, I guess, if you will. So I like Tracy Cortez to win. I like Norma Dumont to win. I'm not calling either of those locks, but I'm saying those two fights to go the distance. Absolutely, I'm going to call a lock. And Keith, do you have any more prelim locks for us?
No, but I actually have some fights that I'm really looking forward to. And there's one that I wouldn't call a lock for me, this pick, but it is one that I really am leaning towards at the moment. And that is actually Chaos Williams to win by knockout over Randy Brown. I feel like this is one that's going to be a lot of fireworks here. Chaos Williams, the name suits him very well. He is a guy with heavy hands, great kicks, a great stand-up game overall. And, he's a minus 135 favorite going into this one straight up. So I think part of the reason why I'm leaning towards this pick is because I'm really looking forward to seeing what those juicy knockout or TKO lines are going to be for Chaos Williams. I do think that he has the ability to, really put Randy Brown to sleep in this one. And one of the main reasons why I'm also leaning towards it too is because it's the main event for the prelims, right? This is the fight that they're closing out the prelims with to kick off the main card, essentially. And they always want fireworks in that fight. They want asses in seats. They really want like a big flashy KO to, lead people into the main card. So I am leaning towards that Chaos Williams by knockout pick. And then a fight that I am just looking forward to watching is actually going to be Brandon Royval versus Matt Schnell. I think that that's a fun matchup. That's going to be a good one for the prelims. But you also mentioned in there Tracy Cortez and Brian Ortega being a couple. And I do just want to say I almost forgot that the two of them were together.
How could you? They post about it nonstop.
Well, I'll be honest, I unfollowed Brian Ortega and Tracy Cortez a little while ago because it was getting a little bit, annoying. but they are such a good-looking couple. Good for them. Two good-looking people that both have great careers in a fun sport found each other.
Does she have Justin Gaethje in a Yankees hat tattooed on her arm? Have we ever figured out who that horrible tattoo is? I mean, if you look it up, anyone who's watching this, go look up Tracy Cortez's tattoo. It's absolutely terrible. It looks like it was drawn by a sixth grader with a crayon and somehow pasted on her shoulder. I hope it wasn't actually done by a child or someone important to her that maybe passed away. Then I'll feel terrible. But if not, and that's truly just the artistic creations of whoever her tattoo artist is, that person should maybe consider a different career. It looks like Justin Gaethje in a New York Yankees hat. It's ridiculous. I want to know the story behind it. But I want to go back to your Chaos Williams Randy Brown pick. I really like that a lot. I didn't realize that was the main event of the prelims of the undercard. And I'm looking back at this Randy Brown. He is more of a grappler. His most recent submission is coming against Cowboy Oliveira, who is either not in the UFC or basically on his way out. That guy is basically not performed lately. And, getting a submission win over him, I don't know if that really counts greatly into what you're trying to do, especially if you're going to be a submission guy in Chaos Williams. You're looking at the people at Tapology. With 949 votes, 70% of the vote coming in on Chaos, with 86% of them going for him by KO and TKO. And he's knocked out guys with the legs of Miguel Baeza. He's gotten the win over Semi the Jetty 10 months ago. He took the loss to Michel Pereira, but, again, Michel Pereira is doing a lot of really great things right now, so I'm not going to slight him too much on that. And then, he's got two knockouts right before them, the great white we were talking about before, Alex Morono. So I really like Chaos Williams. Like you were saying, the UFC, they want to structure the card in a way that's going to entice people and make them want to buy the main card. And putting Chaos Williams, a guy with the name Chaos, right? I mean, spelled with a K, not Colby with a C. But, putting him right up there at the top, a guy who's got knockout power against another guy who has the ability to get knocked out, where stand-up isn't actually his forte or his method that he would pick to fight in. I think that's a really good pick. And then one other one that I want to – we came into this saying, oh, yeah, I don't know if I have that many prelim locks, and now we're going on basically talking about it for like 10 minutes. But the last one I want to point to is Andre Fialho coming in against Cameron Van Camp. Fialho, he had just fought, I believe it was last month, got the win over Miguel Baeza in a first round by knockout. He looks very, very impressive there. He's coming in against Cameron Van Camp, which I believe this will be his first UFC fight. Looking at his 5 on in, he beat Kenny Godrow, who's 10-7 via submission by Darstro. He beat Hazraz Cyan 5-4 by submission a year ago. Craig Eckelberg 10-6 submission by armbar, and then Dan Stitchigen by decision, 12-6. All of those guys outside of the UFC, not great records. So you're looking at a submission guy against Andre Fialho, who definitely has knockout power and knocked out guys in the UFC with the legs of Miguel Baeza. It's interesting to see Fialho get booked so soon against a UFC newcomer. Now, there is a little bit of risk with that. Right now, if he loses this fight, Cameron Van Camp takes all of his hype. But I still like Andre Fialho, and I trust Andre Fialho. Looking at the people of Tapology, 94% of the votes coming in on Fialho. This, I think, was either just made or made fairly recently. So Fialho, I like him as well as a prelim lock. Anything else?
I like that pick a lot because Fialho did look great against Miguel Baeza. And let's be honest, Miguel Baeza, he's been in there with some wars. He was in there with, I believe, Santiago Ponzinibbio, just scrapping it out last year for 3 rounds in what was an incredible, if there weren't other great fights that year, that could have been a fight of the year candidate. But Miguel Baeza is nobody to scoff at. And he has had some issues. He had to go to a sports psychologist after some of his losses last year. And I only wish him the best because he is entertaining, and I hope that, whatever mental turmoil he's going through right now, is short-lived. But Andre Fialho did look great against Miguel Baeza, and that's a great pick. I really like that pick. For me, I have no other prelim locks, so if you're ready, we can dive into this juicy main card. With that being said, we've got Donald Cowboy Cerrone, potentially the one and only Cowboy now that Cowboy Oliveira is maybe out of the UFC, versus Joe Lauzon. And I like this fight a lot. It's 2 old, washed-up guys that are having a hard time. Lauzon hasn't even fought in 2 years, and Cowboy Cerrone has fought an absolute murderer's row in his last few fights. He had a loss to Alex Morono, which felt like a potential setup for Cowboy. Give him a new, young guy. And Morono proved to be really, really hungry and way more skilled and technical than anybody thought. And then, looking back before that, Cowboy has fought Anthony Pettis, Conor McGregor, Tony Ferguson, just to name a few in his last couple of fights. He has fallen off. I mean, he was once a legend. He still is a fan favorite. And there is talks that this could potentially be Cowboy's last fight in the UFC or one of his last. So how do you want to send out a legend, a potential, maybe Hall of Famer? You do it by giving him, by feeding him somebody, just like they tried to do with Morono. Joe Lauzon is another guy that people who are fans of Cowboy's heyday will know Joe Lauzon. He is a veteran of the game. But like I said, 2 years off, Cowboy's still active. I think that this is going to be a pretty clear win for Cowboy. I don't know if he has the power in his hands anymore to get it done by knockout. I still think that he is, practicing and is participating in grappling outside of the UFC enough now at this point and he's always had a pretty solid jiu-jitsu game. And if you're not active, jiu-jitsu can really catch up to you really fast. I think Cowboy, being that he's active and Lauzon is not, I actually like Cowboy to win this one by submission. One of Cowboy's favorite things to do in the past in his career is fight somebody up against the cage. Most recently, it's been him being brought to the cage and demolished with knees and shoulders and elbows and things like that. But I think that in this one, we're going to see Cowboy swarm Lauzon up against the cage early on, not be able to finish him on his feet, bring him to the ground, double leg takedown, sit in his full guard for a little bit, pass over, and potentially finish this one by an arm triangle choke. So I'm taking Cowboy to win this one by submission. What do you think about that one, Tom?
Yeah, I'm taking Cowboy to win for a lot of the reasons you posed, but I'm not going to take him by submission because Joe Lauzon has an accomplished ground game. And, I'm going back and I'm looking at, well, maybe not super accomplished, but, I think at the end of the day, the UFC opening up the main card for a pay-per-view that they're now charging people $75 for, I think that it's something that they're going to want to see fireworks. And with two guys who are a little bit older, and I want to take this into account here, yes, Cowboy Cerrone has been knocked out a lot, but a lot of those knockouts came at 170. Alex Morono fight, he was preparing for a fight, I believe, for a catchweight bout at like 160, 165. Something fell out. He had to fight Alex Morono on short notice. Morono is a 70-pounder, and he's a big 70-pounder at that. And I just don't think he was ready for the power that was going to be coming back at him. Cowboy Cerrone at this stage in his career, he's taken a lot of damage for a long time inside of the UFC. I think that 70-pounders right now just have too much power coming back at him. But, hey, guess what? This is a fight that's happening at 155 against Joe Lauzon, who's a guy who has a career outside of the UFC. I think it's in IT or commentating or something, but he hasn't probably been putting the full amount of effort forth to training the way that Cowboy Cerrone has. So for those reasons, I like Cowboy Cerrone. I like, the UFC is going to kind of send him off. He's always been a company man doing whatever the UFC wanted. So I would hope that the UFC would give him an extremely winnable bout and an exciting matchup for one of his last two send-off fights. At the end of the day, as much as we love Cowboy, and I'm a big Cowboy fan, and we all like watching Cowboy. He's got one of the coolest nicknames and one of the coolest personas, and just a genuine good guy. We don't want to see him fight too much more. We don't want to see him potentially have issues with speech or what have you down the line. I mean, this is a guy who's had a litany of injuries in his entire career, both from the octagon and outside the octagon. I mean, he got disemboweled riding a horse, I believe, or something like that, or maybe it was an ATV. But this is a guy who's, I mean, you'll see it on Saturday. He comes in there and he's got scars all over his torso and everything. This is a guy who's just tough as nails and never going to say die, but I think he's going to come out here and I think he's going to be able to get a finish here against Joe Lauzon. And if it's not a finish, I think he's definitely going to be able to get the win here. Joe Lauzon is a guy who's shown that he can be chinny in the past with, losses to guys with the likes of Chris Buchmacher, Clay Guida. He lost recently, I guess 4 years ago. But being outside the cage, 2.5 years ago, or 2.5 years, and Conor McGregor said it itself after he lost the first time to Dustin Poirier, where in order to be good at this game, you really do have to remain active. And Cowboy has been active, whether it's been actually fighting and not so much recently to allow his brain to repair and heal itself. But, he's been active in grappling bouts, which he hasn't done great in either. But he's always fighting the top guy that he can get. So I like Cowboy in this one.
Let me just lean more into that submission and, Cowboy by submission pick that I had. And this is one of my final points. Lauzon was in a grappling match, a jiu-jitsu match with Dylan Dennis and lost by Darce choke.
Well, Dylan Dennis is a good grappler.
Yeah,
Dylan Dennis is good at that. At the very least, he's not a good MMA fighter, but he is a good grappler at the very least. When you remove the threat of being punched in the face, which he doesn't take well, and he's kind of a bit. I mean, he's a leech for popularity or publicity, and will do whatever he can. But you got to give credit where credit's due. He is at least a good grappler.
Yeah, Dylan Dennis is a little attention whore, but that is a good point. That all the people at home that hate Dylan Dennis as much as anybody else, anyone else who is active on MMA Twitter. I feel like going into this one, if you hear that someone has a loss to Dylan Dennis in any sort of way, a guy that, listen, I mean, Dylan Dennis, sure, he's good at grappling, except for when he's grappling against the Jersey Shore Police. So, I don't know if he's actually as good as we think he is. But,
well, no, you make a good point. If you have a loss to Dylan Dennis in chess, people are going to talk shit about you. Like, you can't lose to Dylan Dennis in literally anything. If you lose to him in a foot race, people are going to be like, "Oh shit, you lost to Dylan Dennis." Like, you fucking suck. So yeah, I agree with you as far as that goes for sure.
Yeah, so that's part of why I'm leaning into that, because I feel like if you're getting choked out by Dylan Dennis, who gets choked out by Paul Blart, then things aren't looking up for you. But so that's where we're going. We're both going with Cowboy. I do like a potential double chance bet here where you're taking KO or submission, because you did mention that Joe Lauzon is pretty chinny throughout the course of his career. Maybe because he's been away, he's recovered with that chin. But, this is just a total mismatch. And even if you take Cowboy straight up at minus 180, that is a high value pick right there. So Cowboy money line is a great pick as well. So next up, we have OSP, Ovince St. Preux versus Mauricio Rua II. And I'm rolling with OSP for this one. And, it's a little bit tough. OSP is really having a tough time recently. I personally, if I was a matchmaker for the UFC, wouldn't have put this on the main card. But, OSP is a guy that really showed a lot of promise for a while there. He's been in the octagon with another murderer's row of competition, Jamal Hill, who is rising up throughout light heavyweight ranking right now. Ben Rothwell, Nikita Krylov, Dom Reyes, Corey Anderson actually has a win over Corey Anderson. But, I feel like this is another one. It's very similar to Cowboy because, as you remember, not too long ago, the rumor was OSP is on his way out. The career is dead and gone. And Mauricio Rua, he's just not on par with a lot of the guys that OSP has fought over his career, his tenure in the UFC. So, being that OSP has some pretty heavy, damaging hands, he did show some fear, like when he fought Tanner Boser the last time, where Tanner Boser was really just able to do whatever he wanted with OSP, which is what scares me about OSP going into this one, is the mindset, the mentality in the cage, the fear to walk forward towards his opponent. But, I just think OSP is a different caliber of fighter. He's seen a different caliber of guys from Mauricio Rua. But, Vegas sees this as a little bit closer than I do. We've got OSP coming in at minus 240, which is like a moderate favorite, versus Mauricio Rua at plus 200. So it's a potential trap here because we all know who OSP is, but OSP has a way more complete game than Mauricio Rua. He has wins by submission in his resume, and wins by knockout, but losses of all different sorts. So I just think OSP is the smarter pick here, but it's not one I feel super confident about. What do you think about this one, Tom?
Yeah, we have a battle of the guys who are 39 and 40 years old. OSP, he debuted he didn't debut in the UFC, but he debuted in 2003. A guy who kind of had his career arc along the same times of like guys like Andrei Arlovsky, who we just clap it up for getting a win last week, deserved or undeserved. It goes down on the scorecards as a win for Andrei Arlovsky at the ripe old age of 43. OSP is a guy who has been in multiple weight classes over his career. 205. He's fought at heavyweight, and he looked really big at heavyweight. He may have even fought at middleweight. I may be wrong on that, so don't take that to the bank. But at the end of the day, Mauricio Shogun, who has fought at 205 his entire career, and he lost to Anthony Smith quite a few years ago. Came back, he had a win against Tyson Pedro in a fight that I think Tyson Pedro blew out his knee and then was able to get finished by ground strikes there. So I mean, take that what you will. Tyson Pedro has he is 7-2, and we saw him come back and have a really good win fairly recently. Dominating win, powerful win. So, good for Shogun Rua. He fought to the draw with Paul Craig of Scotland. So, this split decision, it was a draw. 2.5 years ago, he had another split decision against Little Nog about a year and 9 months ago, and then he had the rematch with Paul Craig and tapped in the first round due to strikes, or it was a TKO due to strikes in the first round. So, I think we're seeing definitely the decline of Shogun Rua here. You could see it in his body that, he is just not the same fighter now at 40 years old that he was at 35, definitely not in his early 30s. But as he's gotten older, he's always been a guy who's known for really solid ability to keep the fight standing and then finish it with TKOs or powerful punches. And OSP is going to be a guy, even though he's going to be 2 inches shorter, he's, I believe, going to have a 4 or 5 inch reach advantage here. Another guy who uses his legs and uses his distance to stay on the outside. And I think that's ultimately what's going to allow him to get the win here. I don't know if Shogun in the older age is going to be able to get in on OSP and land those big, powerful strikes that he's going to need to in order to stun him. Even though OSP is coming off he's basically 2-3 in his last 5. He's a very accomplished submission artist, but also, he has the KO TKO power. He's lost to Tanner Boser, but that was at heavyweight, and Tanner Boser is a guy who isn't a bad fighter at heavyweight. And he's got the loss to Jamahal Hill, who Jamahal Hill is really, really good, and we could see him, contending to be in the top of the division very, very soon, and fighting for the belt potentially. So I'm not going to count that too much. And here's the thing. There's almost 2 OSPs. You can get an OSP who's motivated and trying to fight and, really wants to win. Or you can get an OSP that comes in, kind of against the Tanner Boser, who looks kind of unmotivated, and Tanner Boser has his way with him. I'm hoping that we're going to get the motivated OSP, being that he is going to come in here against a guy who's going to be a little bit older than him. And when OSP is 39 years old, you don't get that opportunity too much. So he's going to have that, kind of going for him. He's going to have the distance going for him. The fact that this is probably going to remain a striking battle is going to be, going for him. So I'm going to go for OSP here. I don't feel super duper confident, but just looking at kind of the physique of Shogun Rua and the fact that he's been out of the cage for now almost a year and a half at 40. Last time he fought was at 38, and it was a brutal loss to Paul Craig. I like OSP to take this one.
Nice. This is definitely, like, this first half of the main card is definitely a card for long-time fans of the sport.
The Legends League is basically what it is. I think I saw something on Twitter where somebody was proposing that they have a specific division just for people kind of in this realm where they're legends. They still want to fight, but they shouldn't be fed. They shouldn't be gatekeepers. They shouldn't be fed to new up-and-coming talent who there's such that age and, let's not lie, testosterone disparity. I think we're looking at Cowboy Cerrone versus Joe Lauzon and OSP versus Mauricio Shogun Rua as basically the trial run potentially for that like legend style division where we could see guys who want to fight but maybe the refs have a little bit more care dedicated to those fights and stop them a little bit sooner. And everyone knows what they're getting when they go into it. But they still want to see. And unfortunately, I was just watching a Chuck Liddell documentary last night. You don't want to see Chuck Liddell go in there and get pieced up by Tito Ortiz when Tito Ortiz has clearly still got his regular testosterone and hormones going for him, and Chuck Liddell is drained and obviously battered and beaten. So I think there is something to be said about that potential legends only thing that Mike Tyson was kind of looking at for him, Evander Holyfield, Roy Jones Jr., things like that. So yeah, this is a preview of that.
Yeah, I really I am looking forward to that. Especially I work with some guys that are a little bit older and have been longtime fans of the sport. I work with a guy that wears a Nick Diaz t-shirt into work every day, and loves the old time, vets of the game. Super excited to hear his take about this card. So now we're rolling into, fans, fights for newer fans of the sport. And I mean, these two guys, one of them is one of my favorite fighters of all time since his Bellator days. The other guy, I know he's one of your favorite fighters since his heyday in the UFC. We've got Mike Chandler versus Tony Ferguson. And Mike Chandler is coming into this one as a very heavy favorite. He is, on some books, over minus 450 from the odds makers. He's a heavy, heavy favorite coming into this one. And I think rightfully so. I think you're out of your mind if you're going with Tony Ferguson. Now, I apologize in advance if that's your pick. But Tony Ferguson is this shell of who he was. He is not the Tony Ferguson that was so amped to fight Khabib. He is not the Tony Ferguson that was annihilating guys like Cowboy with elbows and a barrage of just various different attacks. He's now a guy that gets, laid down on by Beneil Dariush and, submitted by Charles Oliveira, I believe. I believe Charlie Olive submitted him. He's just not the same guy. And it's unfortunate to see because Tony was such a highly touted prospect or contender for such a long time. He was so entertaining for a while there. He still is an interesting personality, and it'll be fun to watch him get up there on the press conference stage on Friday or Thursday, actually. But this just isn't the same Tony Ferguson that we saw for so long, growing up, basically. And I blame The Wire at the Khabib press conference. I think that was the demise of Tony Ferguson's career. Anybody who doesn't know, he was getting ready to fight Khabib. They had the press conference and whatnot, and then, backstage, tripped and fell on a wire, got hurt, took himself out of the fight. Michael Chandler, on the other hand, he is just pure violence. He, in 3 fights in the UFC, he fought Dan Hooker, knocked him out, fought Charles Oliveira for the vacant lightweight title, almost knocked him out, had some really impressive moments where, Charles Oliveira was on his back. Mike Chandler found a way to stand up, jump back down. He has really strong hips and really strong explosion. Got out of Charlie Olive's grip on the ground, and ultimately was sat down by a punch in that one. And then was in one of the most entertaining fights of all time, the actual fight of the year last year against Justin Gaethje, in which the two of them just traded blows for 3 rounds, ultimately Justin Gaethje coming out on top. But Mike Chandler is, at this point in his career, the much better fighter. He's got way more power than Tony Ferguson. He's a way better wrestler than Tony Ferguson is right now. He's got a way better ground game. And one thing we have to keep in mind, too, is Mike Chandler in that fight against Justin Gaethje knows that he fucked up. He knows that he was way too aggressive out of the gate with throwing power shots to try and put Justin Gaethje away very early. That ultimately cost him his cardio towards the end of the fight. We're not going to see him doing that against Tony Ferguson. He said it in multiple interviews, he would like to finish this fight, but he's not going to be overly aggressively looking for the finish. Because also, if you're overly aggressive with Tony Ferguson too, and you throw something that kind of whiffs, we've seen him do it a million times in the past, Tony Ferguson will hit you with a spinning elbow, or I believe it's like the 12-6 elbow where he comes up from down low, hits you in the same spot as an uppercut, but with his sharp elbows. We're going to see a reserved Michael Chandler that's still effective, and could still put Tony Ferguson away, but he's not going to be too aggressive and wear himself out, because that ultimately could be his demise against Tony Ferguson. So I like Mike Chandler, and he also did say this too on UFC. I can't remember the name of the show, like the vlog show that they have.
Embedded?
Yes, Embedded. He also did say that the plan against Justin Gaethje was to mix in some takedowns, and he failed to do so. He planned on attacking the body a lot more, mixing up where he was landing his punches. Failed to do that until the end of the fight. I think that you're going to see a Mike Chandler that sticks to that game plan, lands a lot more body shots on Tony Ferguson, mixes it up, gets him to drop his hands, lands a couple of takedowns, controls Tony on the ground like we've seen happen to him over his last couple of fights. This one's tough to pick a method of decision, but I think either way, it's probably going to come down to a knockout, just based on how Tony is a little bit more chinny at this point in his career. Michael Chandler has such powerful, heavy hands. But I also think that based on Tony's toughness, this could go the distance. So I think a smart pick here would be a double chance bet with Mike Chandler to win by KO or decision. But I don't think that you can bet on Tony Ferguson whatsoever in this one, unless you say that you're going to right now, Tom. What do you got?
No, and I'm right there with you. And like I in preparation for this, I kind of look around. There's some really good videos online of other UFC fighters kind of trying to diagnose and thinking of talking about what they're gonna see, and some interviews. And I really failed to see anybody make a coherent argument for how Tony Ferguson is going to get this done against Michael Chandler. I know there's only a 2-year age gap here, but there is a pretty solid size disparity, especially when you look at just their waist sizes. I mean, Michael Chandler has a big trunk, and he is full of muscle. He is explosive, and you hear Pat McAfee talk about it a lot. Explosivity is the thing that really impacts whether you have power, whether that be your leg, whether that be your swinging of a bat, whether it's your throwing of a football, or why would it be any different, punching power. And Michael Chandler exudes explosivity. People talk about his speed is something that they are really unprepared for, especially going in early. And Justin Gaethje was talking about it. He was saying, in those first few punches, he was getting sent. It's like, okay, shit, this guy's fast, right? And then they had to just kind of start throwing at each other. And it was a fantastic fight. But I don't think, one of two things is going to happen. Like you said, it's either going to be decision or a TKO for Michael Chandler. I'm not sure if Tony Ferguson's chin can hold up. It's held up to this point, but once a chin cracks, it cracks. Even the TKO loss to Justin Gaethje, he was basically out on his feet, and Herb Dean had to step in there and stop it to save Tony Ferguson from himself.
Yeah, he kept shooting his head trying to stop himself from shutting off.
He was Tony Ferguson. If his name wasn't El Cucuy, it would be the zombie. It would be the Mex-American zombie. I think it would be a great name for him because he likes to talk about how he's American and he's Mexican. Listen, Tony Ferguson is responsible for some of the best quotes in the history of the UFC. For one, this is a rat race, but I'm not a rat. I'm a turtle, a ninja turtle. Who's your favorite? I like Michelangelo. Next question. What are we talking about? I cannot wait to hear Tony Ferguson. I think he should have his own show, YouTube channel, what have you. I think Tony Ferguson definitely needs to lean into a little bit more of his charismatic personality moving forward than his ability to just take shots. I don't think when you look at these two guys, you go, oh, who's going to win? And I think Michael Chandler has all of the intangibles to get it done. Tony Ferguson is a very awkward fighter, but I don't see Michael Chandler being able to be submitted by him. There was a point in that Charles Oliveira fight where he had his back taken. I think it was in the first round, and then he was just sitting there, and then he was like, all right, I'm just going to get up, and just freaking got up. Like, just made the decision and just got up. And I don't think that at this point in his career, Tony Ferguson has anything for Michael Chandler that Charles Oliveira didn't have. I think Charles Oliveira is going to definitely get the notch in terms of the power over Tony Ferguson. And maybe he goes back to his roots. I know he said he's been doing a lot of wrestling training for this, but I mean, I don't know if Tony Ferguson's going to have just the raw strength to out-wrestle Michael Chandler if that's where this goes. Tony Ferguson, really good off his back. He's got those slicing elbows, but we've seen Michael Chandler have no problem with bleeding, and he just gets hit and keeps moving forward as his motto, or his Michael Chandler definitely could be a
motivational speaker.
Motivational speaker, exactly. He speaks in poems, and he definitely lives by them. And now he's got his second child. Is Michael Chandler the Angelina Jolie of the UFC, just adopting multiracial babies from all over the world? Potentially, remains to be seen. But he's gonna have that double layer dad strength coming in. And yeah, I just see everything being in Michael Chandler's corner, but it's just so hard to decide how this fight's going to finish, because we don't know if Tony's chin is going to hold up. Is he going to be able to go to decision like he did? I mean, he fought out of some disgusting submission attacks by Charles Oliveira, by Beneil Dariush in his last few fights. So I don't know if Tony is finishable unless a ref gets involved. So it's really going to come down to the ref and seeing when they want to stop it. But I feel very comfortable picking Michael Chandler here by method of victory, violence.
Yeah, very well said. He is one of the most violent fighters in the UFC at the moment, and was in his days at Bellator as well. I do want to mention my favorite Tony Ferguson press conference gem of a line. And that was actually in the last one when Mike Chandler was going to fight Charles Oliveira, and Tony Ferguson was going to fight Beneil Dariush. And he was like, why does this Chandler guy get to cut the line? He's got Dana White privilege. That one was perfect. Now you hear all sorts of people using it. Aljo uses it sometimes, even when it doesn't apply, because he's not the best shit talker, the smartest guy. Anything to take a stab at Aljo over here. But, Tony Ferguson, one of the all-time greats. Chandler is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of his career this week. But moving on up, we have Rose Namajunas versus Carla Esparza. And before we spoke on this show, pre-recording, pre-going live, Tom and I spoke about it and said, wow, we have all the same picks, Okay, sometimes we and we diverge a little bit. But, and I said at first, maybe there's an argument to be made for Carla Esparza. Her wrestling is good. She has the win over Rose Namajunas from that season of Tough when they first introduced this women's division to the UFC. But two things, just as soon as I said it, I said, well, there's counters to both of those arguments. First off, Rose has gotten so much better since she first fought Carla Esparza in all realms. Her ground game is significantly better. Her jiu-jitsu and her anti-wrestling, so to speak, is significantly better since the first time that she fought Carla Esparza. And also, Rose is 4-0 in rematches in the UFC. With a win over Carla Esparza here this weekend, that would push her over to 5-0 in rematches. She might be the rematch queen. So Thug Rose, we've spoken about her so much, and if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I'm a huge Rose Namajunas fan. Like right now, for me, more than anything, yeah, it's Mike Chandler fight week. I'm excited for that, but this is Thug Rose fight week, and I could never ever pick against Thug Rose. She's got such a complete game plan. She can do it all when it comes to striking. She's highly intelligent, not to mention she has a great striking coach in Trevor Whitman, who just writes up some of the best game plans for his fighters and works on it thoroughly after picking apart film of their competitor. We saw it the first time that she fought Weili Zhang. Trevor Whitman must have noticed on the film, well, when you go to kick the leg kick with the inside or the outside leg, so to speak, she kicks her whole body back, exposes her chin, fake the low kick, go up high, put Wang Zhili to sleep. And that's exactly what Rose did, how it was drawn up by Trevor Whitman. And I have to imagine that he's got an incredible game plan written up for Carla Esparza, a woman that Rose is also familiar with as well from sharing the octagon with her before. And there's not much that you can say about Rose Namajunas' ground game and jiu-jitsu besides the fact that it's incredible. You know, she kicked off her MMA career with flying arm bars, and I believe Invicta. You know, just going stupid, flying through the air, and even more impressive than Demetrius Johnson's flying arm bars, in my humble opinion. Rose Namajunas, she is like the queen of the UFC right now that everybody loves. There's no debate about it whatsoever. You know, if you're not a Rose fan, you're losing at life right now. She's great. She's the best. And if you weren't brought to tears, at least shed one tear, get a little bit watery-eyed with her, I'm the best, crying when she got the belt put on her against Weili Zhang. And, you know, saying, yeah, I am the best to Joe Rogan. Even Joe Rogan was nearly brought to tears by that. Mike Tyson was brought to tears by that. If you were not moved by Rose and her performance and who she is as a person, and you're not a Rose fan, like I said, not only are you losing at life right now, but you're also probably soulless. So Rose Namajunas, this is tough to pick a method of victory. I'm just going to check out these odds live right now. I have them because maybe we do have to juice things up a little bit here and make it a little bit more appealing. And then we'll have to pick them. No, actually, Rose is minus 200 right now. I'm perfectly fine taking a minus 200 Rose line straight up. I like that line. But if I were to pick, I'd say maybe Rose. Nah, I'm not going to get into that. I'm taking Rose straight up here. Love Rose. She can get it done any which way. So Rose at minus 200 is a good high-value pick. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I hear everything you're saying. Carla Esparza, you know, she does have the win over Rose I think it was a tough season finale, but since then, these two fighters have vastly grown, each in of their own right. Carla Esparza's on a very nice win streak as of late, 5-0 in her last 5 with wins over Berna Jandiroba by decision, Alexa Grasso by decision, Michelle Waterson by a split decision, Marina Rodriguez by a split decision, and then most recently, 11 months ago, Yan Zhangyan, TKO. And then looking at Rose, her last 5 in, she's 4-1 in her last 5. The win over Joanna Jędrzejczyk, the only person to ever stop her. She does have the loss to Jessica Andrade following the slam and the TKO, but she followed that one up with a rematch and a split decision win there. Zhang Weili beat her by TKO head kick. We talked about it. That's the best fight. Handed her her first loss and then followed up split decision win in her in that rematch fight. Gave Zhang Weili her second loss. You know, I think, you know, a lot of what you were saying rings true as far as Trevor Whitman and his ability to game plan. And Rose, as she's grown throughout UFC, her fight IQ has only grown. She has become a much more tactical and strategic fighter. Early on in her career, she was known for her spinning things and back leg kicks and kind of going crazy and just kind of impromptu fighting style. But now it's definitely a lot more calculated. And for all of those reasons, I'm going to go with Rose, and I will go as far as say it's a decision. And if history reigns true, it should be a split decision, right? You look at a lot of these rematches that Rose has came in, and they have been close because a lot of people that come back and they fight Rose, there's a ton of tape on her, and a lot of people are, you know, really high on Rose, but they also are coming for her neck. And, you know, a lot of people, and I know you said, you know, if you're not a Rose fan, you're a loser. I hear what you're saying, but there's a lot of people who don't like Rose from the better red or dead thing earlier on in against the Zhang Weili fight #1. So I'm sure that Rose has her haters. If she doesn't have any haters, she's not doing something right. But at the end of the day, I am firmly on the Thug Rose train, and I think Thug Rose comes out and gets it done against Carla Esparza. I think she's just better in everywhere that the fight can go. I think she's better. She has really good takedown defense. She's been working with Kamaru Usman and Justin Gaethje, who are wrestling specialists by trade, or at least on paper they like to say they are. So for all of those reasons, I'm really going to go with Thug Rose here. I think it may be a really close fight, but you look at like the level of competition. You know, the names that I rattled off for Rose are people who are at the top of the division. And Rose, not that Carla Esparza has fought no ones, but like Michelle Waterson and Marina Rodriguez I mean, they're good, but they're not, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Zhang Wei Li, and they're not Jessica Andrade, who is now owner of the first standing arm triangle in definitely women's MMA, but it might also be MMA or UFC as a whole. And real quick, just want to shout out Gray. Thank you, Gray. Appreciate you. Let everyone know. Solid stuff here. Really like to hear that being said. So appreciate you being active in the comments this morning.
Yes, thank you, Gray. That's awesome. I don't know how you're the only one watching this. I'm sure, maybe across YouTube and Twitter, there's 3 of you out there. But, with that being said.
It's Monday morning. Maybe people have work. They'll catch us later on. I know that we scheduled this maybe an hour before we went live. So we'll give people benefit of the doubt. But, yeah, definitely help us out, Gray. Let people know.
Yeah, send this to your friends. And please, while you're here, like, subscribe, leave more comments if you have any other questions. And also follow us on our Twitters. They're right below our handsome faces. And follow us on Instagram and on Twitter @_Pickin Winners. That's our big group. And our Instagram @Pickin Fights. Check all that out. We'll let you know when we're coming out with our new content so you don't miss anything that we're posting up here or talking about live. Speaking of which, I'm sure we'll go live after the fights on Saturday night. We are all degenerate gamblers. Thank you. So, with that being said, let's get into the main event here. I'm super excited for this one. I mean, we've got Charles Oliveira defending for the second time against another trained killer in Justin Gaethje. It's going to be incredible. And I'm going to preface this by saying in Charles Oliveira's last couple of fights, he's had bad moments early on where he gets hit really hard in the face, falls down, usually gets wobbled. Looks like it's all going to be over for Charles Oliveira, and he's going to be surrendering that belt to somebody else. I think that it's going to play out very similarly against Justin Gaethje on Saturday. Justin's going to have some great moments early on. He is such a great striker. I just spoke about Trevor Whitman and what a great striking coach he is. And Justin Gaethje also works with Trevor Whitman. I think that we're going to see Charles trying to work things early on, a lot of front kicks, a lot of deep kicks, body work, that it's not going to work for him. He has really long arms, a long reach, and, maybe he'll sneak a couple of jabs in there. But Justin Gaethje has actively spoken about it, and we've seen him do it in the past. He walks forward for however long he possibly can in a fight.
Reckless abandon and throwing those wild looping overhands or hooks, and he throws power, and he throws. It's kind of like almost the opposite of what I was saying the last fight against. Oh, Rose, she's really calculated, and Trevor Whitman, and they make good game plans, and everything they do is strategic, and da da da. Yeah, Justin Gaethje fucking throws all of that out the window as soon as the bell rings and goes, I'm just gonna fucking walk forward, and I'm gonna beat the shit out of you, and if that doesn't work, I'm gonna beat the shit out of your leg, and I'm gonna do both at the same time, and I'm gonna fucking throw hands, and that's very similar to what Michael Chandler was doing. Michael's like, hey, I really shouldn't have done that. I should have had more strategy. So it's gonna be interesting to see if Justin Gaethje comes in here with more strategy, or if he just comes in there with that ability to throw hands. We've seen Charles Oliveira have his chin cracked before. That was at featherweight. Moving up to 55, he's been a lot better. But he's a guy who's quit before. But I wonder if that's still going to be his MO. Now that he's got the belt and he's fighting for people, he finally just got that money from Dustin Poirier. So.
Yeah, no, this is a Charles Oliveira, like a resurgence of Charles Oliveira over his last 5, 6, maybe even 7 fights. Looking back a little bit further,
Charles Oliveira is what George Masvidal thinks he is.
Good point. Really good point. Except that Charles Oliveira seems to be better at this point in his career in almost every facet of the game. Obviously George is a great boxer, but Charles has kicks. He has everything to him right now. And the ground game is incredible. I mean, you can't overlook the fact that Charles Oliveira has the most submission wins in UFC history. And with the win over Dustin Poirier by standing rear naked choke, they just keep going up. So I'll jump right in and say, the way that I think that this is going to go is, Justin Gaethje, controlled chaos. He always says that is his style of fighting. He goes in there and it looks crazy, but he lands a lot of shots. Like you said, rips up your leg, destroyed Dustin Poirier's leg when the two of them fought. There's legendary pictures of it. I think he's going to get a couple of great leg kicks in on Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira is susceptible to leg kicks. We saw it when he fought Michael Chandler. He did get Michael Chandler with a couple more very early into that fight, knocked him off his feet. Justin Gaethje isn't as heavy on his front leg. Neither is Charles Oliveira. He is also, as many as he does take, he also checks a couple too. Justin Gaethje is going to have some great moments in that first round. I think that we're all going to leave that first round thinking Justin Gaethje is winning this fight. And then Charles Oliveira is going to start to gain an edge in the second round. And I think that this is going to play out very similarly. Don't forget, it's my pinned tweet on my Twitter. I called the Dustin Poirier fight with Charles Oliveira perfectly. I said it's going to be a choke in the third round. I think Charles Oliveira is going to submit Justin Gaethje with an arm bar in the third round. And I think my reason for this is that Khabib almost had Justin Gaethje in the arm bar in his final fight. We know that Justin Gaethje is susceptible to those when he's a little bit more tired, when he's on the ground. And, I only think that, if you could pick exactly which submission it would be, then I would go with an arm bar. But, Justin Gaethje is a little bit more susceptible to them when he's fighting these great ground guys, great wrestlers, great grapplers, great jiu-jitsu practitioners. And, and Khabib only took mercy on Justin Gaethje and put him in the choke because Justin Gaethje's mother was in the front row and Khabib was apparently making eye contact with her and said, I did not want to, hurt him in front of his mom because I knew he wouldn't tap. I think it's going to go like that. Justin Gaethje is so close to the title again. Charles Oliveira is going to just snap that arm in half because he's not nearly as merciful. This is a Charles Oliveira that doesn't quit. This is a Charles Oliveira that does not show mercy. He lands shots right on the button that put a guy like Michael Chandler away when Justin Gaethje could not. This is a totally different animal that we're witnessing right now. And the only thing that people are discrediting him for is because of his history in the past. I thought so too with Charles Oliveira, but this guy is a future Hall of Famer. He's going to be holding on to this belt for a very long time. Justin Gaethje is just another pin in a series of pins that are going to be knocked down by Charles Oliveira. I don't see any way that he loses this belt, especially when you have Justin Gaethje going on embedded and the conversation with ESPN and saying, this guy better hope he takes me to the ground because that's the only way that he's going to beat me. Sorry to break it to you, Justin, but Charles Oliveira will take you to the ground and he will snap your arm right in half. If you're not feeling the Charles Oliveira pick, go ahead and pick Justin Gaethje to win by knockout because that's the only way that he gets this one done. Charles Oliveira could get this done in a various, variety of ways. He could get on. We saw him against Poirier, was in Dustin Poirier's full guard, landing elbows, landing heavy shots from up top, just controlling him for almost that entire second round, wearing him down. There was a shot there where it looked like maybe Charles had Dustin out for a second with one of those elbows, but ultimately, this is Charles' belt to keep. I like the odds in this one. I really like the Charles Oliveira odds. So even if you just want to take him straight up, that's great. But based on his history, you may as well take Charles Oliveira to win by submission. So with all that being said, Tom, where do you stand on this one?
Yeah, so Justin Gaethje obviously has power in his hands, but when you go back and you look at Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler and you look at Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler, and I'm going to do a little bit of MMA math here, but it's not really just saying, oh, he beat this guy beat this guy, so this guy's going to beat this guy. I'm going to actually look at what happened in those fights. And, Charles Oliveira was taking and returning shots with Michael Chandler and ultimately put Chandler out. Gaethje wasn't able to put Chandler out. So when we're looking at just power versus power, striking versus striking, I'm not going to submit that Charles Oliveira is that far behind Justin Gaethje, right? And then Justin Gaethje, you know, we know that he's got, you know, all of these wrestling acumen in his back pocket. He throws that to the side. He wants to highlight. He wants to be in a fun fight, much like Bobby Green. But when Justin Gaethje gets into a fight against somebody who actually is an accomplished ground specialist, he doesn't do well. Now, he fought against an old Tony Ferguson, and by the time that went to the ground, Tony Ferguson was throwing fake dust in his air, in the air, and you know, just Imanari rolling forward. Like, it wasn't the best Tony Ferguson, and you know, this is Tony Ferguson at 37 years old. Like, that's not going to be the most accomplished ground guy. And Tony Ferguson, if you look at his frame, he's a thin guy. He's not going to have a lot of success against wrestlers. And maybe earlier in his career, when he was a lot more wanky and wonky and different, it would have been a lot different. But you know, so Justin gets that win over Tony Ferguson, right? Michael Chandler, they didn't engage in any ground game. It was literally just a stand-up battle. Let's meet in the middle of the ring and let's just throw haymakers. It might as well have been a boxing or a kickboxing match, right? There was no real grappling aspect to it. But if Charles Oliveira decides he wants to make this a grappling match, I think that's ultimately going to be really bad for the guy in Justin Gaethje who says that he's really, really good on the ground. I mean, he's got his wins against James Vick, Edson Barboza, Donald Cerrone. Edson Barboza back at lightweight. Now he's really on a tear at featherweight. But you go back and you look, you know, Dustin Poirier and Eddie Alvarez, those are two guys that have very similar builds, very similar styles, where they have the big waist and they have the wrestling acumen. And it was a problem for Justin Gaethje. And, you know, Charles Oliveira is very, very good on the ground. He's got an anti-wrestling style. He's got really good offensive jiu-jitsu, and he's got the elbows too, similar to Tony Ferguson. And I'm really of the mindset that after that Charles Oliveira versus Tony Ferguson, I really think they kind of just swapped bodies. And when you root for Charles Oliveira, you're also rooting for Tony Ferguson. I also am big into looking at fighter demeanors leading up into the fight, and I think Justin Gaethje is very, very, very overconfident, especially basically getting embarrassed by Khabib Nurmagomedov, beating Michael Chandler, and now thinking he's back at the top of the world. Like, I mean, you got embarrassed by a guy who, you know, came into that with a broken toe and basically couldn't make weight. I was almost dead the night before trying to make weight. So that wasn't a great version of Khabib Nurmagomedov, and he had his way with Justin Gaethje completely. Now, Justin did land those leg kicks. I think Charles Oliveira is going to be wise. I think he's very humble. I think, you know, training at the Shoot the Box gym, I think they've probably been practicing a lot of, you know, just checking leg kicks. And I would say maybe Justin Gaethje might be he might be a risk to get his shin snapped here. Because when guys rely on those heavy leg kicks, especially early on, the way Justin Gaethje has in his last few fights, you give Charles Oliveira a smart, humble guy a key into what you're going to try and do. And I really think Charles Oliveira is going to be able to check those leg kicks. Surely some are going to land. He's going to fire some back of his own. I think it's going to be a stand-up fight for that first few minutes. But yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Justin Gaethje really gets his shin hurt by trying to continually kick Charles Oliveira, and he checks those, right? If you're Charles Oliveira, you check those leg kicks. What else does Justin Gaethje have? You're already the longer fighter. You already have the experience on the ground. And, you know, looking at the Michael Chandler fight, you have basically just as much power, if not more. So I'm really interested. Charles Oliveira, he's like a sniper when it comes to striking. He's going to come with the straight shots, and he's going to come with the power, whereas Justin Gaethje is going to throw those wild things. And the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So I like Charles Oliveira for the striking for those reasons. And then, like you said, it goes to the ground. Justin Gaethje, especially as it gets later, he's going to gas out a little bit more with those throwing jabs. Takes so much less energy out of you, jabs and straights, than throwing those wild hooks. And Justin Gaethje, especially when he gets chinned or when he gets stung, he just puts his head down and just starts flinging like this. We've seen it in multiple fights before. When he's out on his feet, he just kind of flails a little bit. And I think when you're Charles Oliveira, somebody who has learned to fight basically half blind, I think he's been at his best since he's had the eye injury. So I like Charles Oliveira for a variety of reasons. I couldn't tell you how it's going to ultimately end because it's just that there's a lot of variables, but I like Charles Oliveira, and I would go Charles Oliveira by finish.
Yeah, I'm still rolling with Charles by submission in the third. That's a pick that I feel really, really good about. And, you know, I got to say, too, speaking of confidence and everything, there's a few things that Trevor Whitman has been saying to the media. And this is the first time that I've ever heard Trevor Whitman actually sound a little bit nervous for one of his fighters. You know, he brought up the fact that Shoot the Boxer has been around for so long, and these guys, when they spar, they get into full-on wars with each other. And he almost made it seem as though, like, if anybody has been training the way that you would for Justin Gaethje, it's Charles Oliveira with those wars that he gets into.
Yeah, and I have one more thing about that. You know, you go back and you watch some of the training footage from Charles Oliveira. He's an absolute war. Shoot the box. They're fighting, and then he'll blast a double leg. They're throwing haymakers, fighting, throwing, getting into wars, fighting, boom, blast a double leg. So Charles Oliveira definitely has a good gas tank, but he's going to have that good gas tank even after being in a fists exchange. You know, throwing knuckles and then throwing your shoulder into the guy's waist, doing the double leg and blasting that, getting it to the ground, taking the back. And, you know, when Charles Oliveira is on your back, it's going to be a really, really bad position for Justin Gaethje. And I think we could start seeing that as soon as the first round. But I would say maybe even closer to the second when Justin Gaethje realized, all right, I just got to unleash on this guy. I think potentially Justin Gaethje could try to come in with a little bit more of a controlled chaos. I don't know how much of that is actually controlled. It just seems like he's just literally launching fists like an 8th grader. But he has so much power behind them, and he beats up people's legs that they're going to be more of a stationary target. And I don't think that's going to be the case here for Charles Oliveira. And the more we talk about it, and especially now that you reminded me of that training footage with Charles Oliveira blasting the double, taking it to the ground. Charles said that he's going to, you know, stand there and walk forward and kick him. But like, obviously, you're going to say that if that's not. Why would you just say, oh, this is my game plan? Like, you know, beat me. Justin Gaethje has clearly established what his game plan is. And the last thing I'll note about this, what I really, really like about Charles is that he is so good at a variety of different things. He's able to adapt his style to the guy he's fighting and kind of hit where those guys lack. Whereas Justin Gaethje's like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Beat me at what I'm going to do. And Michael Chandler played right into that. He goes, oh, you want to stand and fight? I'll stand and fight. Instead of trying to go, well, no, I'm a better grappler than you. At least I believe I am. Let's get it to the ground and let's see where it actually pops off. He kind of fed into Justin Gaethje, and my hope is that Charles Oliveira is not going to feed into him and use his skills where Justin Gaethje is lacking, use his intelligence, and use that training of, you know, getting into a war and then blasting the double, get it to the ground. So, yeah, the more we talk, the more I feel more confident in Charles Oliveira. Hopefully this isn't memed later.
I don't think it will be. And finally, one last point that I do want to make about Justin Gaethje, actually, is that Justin Gaethje is a guy that, yes, you do have to, or a lot of people do get in there and start to play at his game a little bit. But Justin Gaethje is a guy that you are instantly elevated to his level. Either you step up to his level in terms of the striking, and, you know, you have to dig a little bit deeper against Justin Gaethje, you know, get a little bit more willpower within you because he is going to hit you with such a barrage of attacks all over. But, you know, Charles Oliveira is this guy that we're seeing now that does dig deep. He's not the quitter anymore. And, you know, ultimately, I think after he wins against Justin Gaethje, not only is it a great fight for his resume, but because of how deep that he's going to have to dig and the level that he's going to have to step up to within the octagon with Justin Gaethje, it's just going to be great for him as a fighter going forward. And then finally, one last thing I do want to say, Michael Chandler did go for those takedowns against Justin Gaethje. I believe he went for like 2 or 3 in rounds 2 or 3. But they were so late in that fight, and they were so telegraphed because his legs were so battered at that point that, you know, Justin Gaethje like basically did a backflip out of one of them. It's going to be different with Charles because, you know, all the things we mentioned about checking leg kicks. You know, Charles, he won't be telegraphing those takedowns, and you know, at least not the way that Michael Chandler was. They're going to be, you know, maybe followed up after a punch, you know, punch right into a double leg takedown, sit in the full guard, adjust him for a little bit, beat him up. You know, and Charles Oliveira is just so diverse of a striker. I mean, I'm so excited for this, and it's crazy to think that a year ago I fucking hated Charles Oliveira because I'm such a big Chandler fan, and now I'm very excited to see him fight. I've gained so much respect for him over the course of his career, and I feel really confident about Charles Oliveira by submission in the third because, like I said, over his career, we always see him lose that first round, you know, get bodied up a little bit and get, eat some clean shots to the face. And then in the second round, especially against Dustin, he finds that control. And then in the third round, ultimately wins, typically by way of submission. So that's it for me. I've got nothing else I want to say about this fight. Do you have any other further points that you would like to make about Justin Gaethje and Charles Oliveira before we run down our picks?
No, I say we hop right into the pick rundown.
All right, sounds good. So I am rolling with Norma Dumont to win by decision. I have Chaos Williams to win by knockout. And then I'm also going to tail you on that pick, that little parlay pick you had with the Dumont-Chiasson fight and the Cortez-Gatto fight to both go to the decision, to go the distance. I'm taking Cowboy Cerrone, potentially by submission, but I like the money line as well. Taking OSP, taking Michael Chandler by knockout, and also taking a double chance bet, Mike Chandler by knockout or decision, just depending on how Tony Ferguson's chin holds up here. Taking Rose Namajunas, and you know what? I'm going to throw this in there now. I like the Rose money line. I also like Rose to win by submission. I didn't say this before, but Carla, we saw how much she likes to take women down, especially in the Yan Xiaonan fight and try and control them. I actually like Rose to potentially lock up a limb if Carla does get a takedown on her. And then I'm rolling with Charles Oliveira by submission in the third round, as well as the Charles Oliveira money line, because he can get it done any which way he wants to. Go ahead, Tom.
So I like, as far as the prelims go, Andre Fiallo by finish. I like the Lupita Godinez and Ariana Camalosi, Tracy Cortez, Melissa Gatto, and the Macy Chiasson, Norma Dumont. I like all three of those. Parlay those to go to the decision. And do I have anyone? Nope. That's what I like for my prelim locks. As far as getting into the main card, I also like Chaos Williams by finish. I like that one too. So I got basically three picks for you on the prelims. One is a 3-fight parlay, and then we got Fiallo by finish, Chaos Williams by finish. I think that they're not going to put something as a main event on the prelims if it's not going to end in spectacular fashion, or at least they're not expecting it to. Donald Cerrone over Joe Lauzon. No idea how that's going to go specifically, but I'm just pulling for Donald Cerrone. A little bit of a heartfelt pick, but also I think he's going to have the fight activity and the intangibles. It's back at 55. I think he's going to have what it takes to get it done against Joe Lauzon. OSP over Shogun Hua. I like Michael Chandler by either finish or decision over Tony Ferguson. So, by KO or by decision if you can get that. Rose Namajunas by decision over Carla Esparza, and then Charles Oliveira by finish over Justin Gaethje. Let's get back on the right track this week. Keith, what do you say?
Oh, I absolutely believe that we will be on track this week. Without a doubt in my mind. I feel very confident about these picks. I hope that doesn't get memed. But if you do want to meme us, at least like the video. Yeah, tag us, of course. I mean, don't just throw this out there, because it's not as much fun if we don't see it. But if you are going to meme us up there, or if you are going to tail our picks, comment down below. Let us know if you like our picks, what you think. I mean, maybe you absolutely hated our picks this week. Let us know. And then we can meme you. But I'm also, I'm going to ask you kind people at home to please subscribe. We need some more subscribers, and you have no idea how much it helps us out when you subscribe and like our videos. Follow us on all of our social media, our individual pages, as well as the overall Pickin' Winners and Pickin' Fights brand. And retweet this video on Twitter as well. So, Tom, thank you for joining me again for another great episode. Had a lot of fun. Really looking forward to regrouping with you and talking about this card, maybe as it gets a little bit closer, or, maybe the night of or the day after the card. I'm super excited. So thank you, bro.
All right. Thank you, guys. Everyone at home, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know your thoughts. Make sure you check out Keith's blog on Pickin' Winners. Make sure you go over to overtimeheroics.net for everything you need for all of you degenerate gamblers. We were talking a little bit earlier about how the people watching these videos, gray, degenerate gamblers. If you're really interested in MMA and you like some of those lesser known promotions, Bellator, ONE FC, Cage Fury, Cage Warriors, go check out overtimeheroics.net. They have all the information on those up-and-coming fighters that we don't necessarily cover here on this channel. I also do a picks video for them over there at Overtime Heroics. It's called the OTH MMA Podcast. You can find it on YouTube where all good podcasts are sold. Other than that, I hope you all enjoy the fights. Have a great week, and we'll check in with you later on.